Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a document that feels less like a theology textbook and more like a wiring diagram for a power plant.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We are breaking down the key of the altar.
It's definitely a manual. And if you are picturing, you know, a dusty wooden table in a cathedral with a doily on it, you really need to wipe that image away immediately.
Right.
This text treats the altar as a piece of high-functioning spiritual technology.
The author is Prophet Joshua Uwuzi. And usually when we look at religious texts, we expect a certain type of language, very flowery, very abstract. But the first thing that jumped out at me wasn't his theology, it was his resume.
I know, right? He's a biochemistry graduate.
Biochemist.
And that background is the lens you have to view this entire document through. You have a guy trained in molecular structures, chemical reactions, strict formulas, and he's applying that exact same analytical rigor to spiritual warfare.
It creates this really interesting friction in the text. He's not talking about feelings or vibes.
Yeah.
He's talking about mechanics. He effectively argues that the spiritual realm has physics, just like the physical realm does.
Think about it this way. In chemistry, if you want a specific reaction, say an explosion or a color change, you need specific reagents in a specific environment.
Okay.
You can't just hope for the reaction. If you miss one chemical, the reaction fails.
Hmm.
Uzziz argues that prayer works the
Oh.
same way. You can't just wish for God's intervention. You need the infrastructure to handle the voltage,
And that infrastructure is the altar,
which he refers to, and this is not a metaphor, he calls it a portal.
a literal portal. So our mission today is to reverse engineer this concept. We're going to look at why Uzi believes you cannot legally contact God without an altar, the difference between the old and new models, which is a huge distinction.
A critical one.
And then we're going to walk through this specific inventory list for building one of these portals in your living room.
It is a fascinating setup, but we have to start with that legal argument you mentioned. It's a bold claim.
It's a massive claim. I think the average person thinks prayer is just, thought transmission. I think God hears it, end of story. Why does this author think that's insufficient?
Because he argues that without a reference altar, you don't have legal access to the spiritual realm.
Legal access.
He cites Revelation and Exodus, basically arguing that prayer isn't just a thought, it's a substance. And that substance needs a transmission tower to be received.
Legal access is such a bureaucratic phrase for religion. It sounds like zoning laws.
That is the biochemist coming out again. He views the universe as a place of jurisdictions. He argues that the earth was given to man. That is our jurisdiction. God, angel, and spirits. They're in a different jurisdiction.
So they can't just barge in.
Can't just barge in whenever they want.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that according to this text, God, who is omnipotent, is somehow restricted from entering the earth?
Restricted by his own laws, yes. That's the implication. If a spiritual entity intervenes on earth without an invitation, it's trespassing. For the divine to operate legally in your living room, it needs an authorized entry point, a permit. And the altar is that permit.
So play that out. If I'm praying in my car or in the shower, according to this text, is that signal just not going through?
It's not that God can't hear you, he knows your thoughts. But Uwizzi distinguishes between God knowing your thoughts and God having the legal landing strip to intervene in your situation to change it.
A landing strip, okay.
He defines the altar as a place of covenant referencing Psalm 50. It's where the contract is signed. If you don't have the desk where the contract sits, you don't have a deal.
That is a very specific, very mechanical way of viewing faith. So let's define altar then, because he gives a few definitions, and they aren't passive. It's not just a shelf where you put your keys.
Far from it. No. He gives 3 layers of definition. First, it's a place of sacrifice. That's the traditional view. Something dies or is offered there, it costs you something.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, as we said, it's a place of covenant. It's the boardroom for the deal.
And the third?
Third, and this is the most sci-fi element, it is a meeting place. He points to Genesis 28, the story of Jacob's ladder.
Right.
Jacob is sleeping on a stone, and he sees a ladder with angels ascending and descending.
Ascending and descending, traffic.
Traffic, commuting. And when Jacob wakes up, he realizes that the stone he slept on was the earthly terminal for that ladder. He calls it the gate of heaven.
Huh.
Uzi latches onto that. An altar is a gateway, a portal.
It's a wild image. You have your living room, your couch, your TV, and then in the corner, a glowing terminal where angelic traffic is coming down.
That is literally the architectural goal he is proposing.
Hmm.
But, and here's where the theology gets technical, He makes a massive distinction between how this worked in the Old Testament versus the New Testament.
You're right, because I assume he isn't telling us to go slaughter a goat in the backyard. My HOA has some pretty strict rules about livestock.
I think we'd all get evicted. No, he clarifies that. He explains that Old Testament altars, like the brazen altar or the golden altar, were perspective.
Perspective.
They were looking forward
Looking forward to what?
to the cross. Every single sacrifice on a stone altar in the Old Testament was a foreshadowing, a prototype of the ultimate sacrifice of Christ. They were placeholders.
Okay, so now that the ultimate sacrifice has happened, do we still need altars? If the prototype is done, why keep the machine?
That's the pivot. He says New Testament altars are retrospective. They look back. They rely on the work that is already finished.
Ah, okay.
And this leads to his most internal point. For the believer, the body is the temple.
So my heart is the altar.
Correct. The heart is the spiritual location where you present the sacrifice of Christ to the Father.
See, that makes sense to me. That sounds like pretty standard New Testament theology. But then he takes a sharp left turn, because if my heart is the altar, why does he spend half the document telling me how to set up a physical table in my house?
It does seem contradictory at first glance, doesn't it? You are the temple, but also go buy a table.
It feels redundant.
Yuzi argues it's about dwelling. He says while your heart is the connector, building a physical altar is about colonizing your environment. It's about externalizing that internal reality to make your physical home a temple for God.
So it's bringing the inside out.
And providing a focal point. Humans are sensory creatures. We drift.
Yeah.
Having a physical portal anchors the spiritual reality. And he is very specific about what goes on this anchor. It's not random decor.
This is the part that fascinated me. It felt like an instruction manual for a radio kit. Insert tab A into slot B. Let's walk through this construction manual. If I want to build a New Testament altar according to Yuzi, what am I shopping for?
First item on the list, the tokens of Christ's sacrifice.
Which would be?
Communion elements. The bread and the wine.
And this ties back to the whole looking back idea.
Precisely. You aren't killing a goat. You are placing the symbols of the finished work on the table. You are physically reminding the spiritual realm of the legal basis for your access. The cross.
So it's the foundation.
If we go back to the chemistry analogy, this is the catalyst. Without this, the reaction doesn't start.
Okay, bread and wine. Check. What's next?
Identity. You need the names of God and titles of Christ.
Like, written down.
On a post-it note. Or,
He implies having them displayed or inscribed. Think of it as address verification. If you're sending a signal, you need to know who is receiving it.
right.
You aren't opening a portal to whoever's out there. You are opening it to El Shaddai, Jehovah Jireh, the Father of Lights. You specify the recipient.
That's actually a really good point. You don't want a prank caller on the spiritual line.
And in the realm of deliverance, which is Yuzi's field, specificity is safety. You want to make sure the portal is exclusive.
Okay, next on the list,
The Constitution,
the Constitution.
the Bible. It sits on the altar as the legal framework. If you are claiming legal access, you need the law book present,
Makes sense.
and then olive oil.
Which I know from Sunday school usually represents the Holy Spirit. Right. But think about oil in an engine or oil in a lamp. It's a conductor. It facilitates the flow. So look at the Trinity forming on the table.
Oh, wow.
You have the Son with the bread and wine, the Father with the names, and the Spirit with the oil. It's a complete circuit.
It really is a technology to him. It's like building a battery. You
Right.
need the positive, the negative, and the electrolyte.
Exactly. Then comes the part that might make some people uncomfortable. He lists tokens of financial offerings and tithes.
Placing money on the altar in your own house, that feels, I don't know, transactional.
It does, and a lot of people bristle at that. But remember, the very first definition, an altar is a place of sacrifice.
Right. It has to cost you something.
In the modern world, money represents our labor, our time, our life force. Placing it there is a tangible way of saying, I am investing in this covenant. It's not payment for services. Within this framework, it's an act of honor. It's putting skin in the game.
It physicalizes the surrender. It's easy to sing I surrender all, but it's a bit harder to put $100 on the table and say this belongs to God.
It makes it real. It proves the connection isn't just theoretical. And then we have incense.
Real incense. Like, do I need to worry about the smoke alarm?
He clarifies this one symbolically. He references Revelation, where the incense is the prayers to the saints. So he suggests writing down your prayer requests, your petitions, and placing them on the altar.
So the paper with the request is the incense.
Exactly. It rises up.
And finally, he mentions mantles. This is a word I hear in charismatic circles a lot, but for the uninitiated, are we talking about a cape? A fireplace shelf?
No, not a cape. Think of a baton in a relay race. In this context, a mantle is a symbol of authority or a calling passed down from one person to another.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay, so it could be a physical object,
Mm.
a prayer shawl, maybe a Bible given to you by a mentor,
Uh-huh.
perhaps a handkerchief from a significant spiritual event. It's an object that represents an anointing you've received or are trusting for.
So it's like putting your credentials on the table.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So you've got this table. It's fully loaded. Bread, wine, oil, Bible, money, prayer list, mantles. It looks like a spiritual command center.
Right.
Well, but you aren't done yet. You've built the hardware. Now you have to program the software.
This is the section on naming, right?
Yes. This was one of my favorite parts of the text because it's so psychological. He argues that an anonymous altar is weak. You have to name it to define its purpose.
Like naming a Wi-Fi network.
Or naming a battleship.
Yeah.
It tells you what it's designed to do. He runs through these great biblical examples. Moses built an altar after a massive battle and names it Jehovah Nissi.
The Lord is my banner.
Right. It was an altar of victory. That was its function. If you went to that altar, you were going there to fight. It wasn't a please help me sleep altar. It was a war altar.
Then you have Gideon.
Gideon was terrified. He thought he was going to die. God calms him down. So Gideon builds an altar and names it Jehovah Shalom.
The Lord is peace.
So that altar becomes a specific portal for peace.
Exactly. It's situational. And then Abraham, the classic one, names the place Jehovah Jireh after God provides the ram to replace Isaac. The Lord will provide.
I think this is where the psychology meets the theology. If I name my altar, the Lord will provide. Every time I walk past it, I'm reminding myself of that specific promise.
It frames your expectation.
Exactly. Uzi challenges the reader. What do you need access to? Do you need peace in your home? Name the altar peace. Do you need financial breakthrough? Name it provision.
It stops it from being a generic religious ritual and makes it a personal, targeted tool.
It's intentionality. It turns praying into targeting.
Yeah.
You're calibrating the portal to a specific frequency.
So we've built it, we've named it. Now, why? What's the ROI here? Because this takes effort. You have to maintain this space. You have to buy the bread and wine.
Uzi answers the why with a story that I think is one of the most underrated episodes in the Bible, the story of Obed-Edom.
I remember this. This is the guy who accidentally ended up with the Ark of the Covenant in his living room.
Yes. And to understand the stakes, we have to remember what happened right before. King David is moving the ark. He's not following the protocols. He's got it on a cart instead of carrying it on poles.
A big mistake.
A huge mistake. The cart stumbles. A man named Uzzah reaches out to steady the ark, touches it, and drops dead.
Immediate death.
Because of the holiness. It's high voltage. If you touch a live wire without insulation, you die. It's not that the electricity is angry, it's just powerful.
So David sees this and understandably freaks out.
He is terrified. He says, I am not taking this thing to Jerusalem. It's too dangerous. So he looks around, sees this guy, Obed-Edom's house. Nearby Obed-Edom was a Gittite, so basically a foreigner, and David basically says, put it in his garage.
Can you imagine being Obed-Edom? Hey, honey, the king just dropped off the box of death. It's in the den.
I'm sure he didn't sleep for the first week. But here's the payoff. The text says the ark, which is the ultimate altar, the literal presence of God, stayed there for 3 months. And what happened?
The Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household.
All of it. Everything he touched turned to gold. His crops, his health, his family. It was radioactive blessing. It radiated out from that box and infected everything in his life with favor.
And Uzi uses this to argue that the physical presence of the altar brings a tangible blessing to the home.
Yes. He's connecting the dots. He's saying, if you build this New Testament altar in your home, you are essentially replicating the Obed-Edom effect. You are inviting that heavy, tangible presence to reside in your domestic space.
It goes back to that legal access. If the portal is open, the traffic flows. And the traffic is blessing.
Right. He also mentions Noah building an altar immediately after the flood, and Abram building one every time he moved his tent. For them, it wasn't a hobby. It was a survival strategy.
They needed the signal to be strong.
They lived in hostile territory. They needed a direct line to HQ. The altar was that line. Without it, they were exposed.
You know, this whole concept really challenges the way we view our homes. We usually think of home as the place we go to check out, to disconnect.
Watch Netflix, sleep, eat. It's a dormant space.
But this text is suggesting the home should be a powerhouse, a spiritual generator.
It dissolves the line between church and life. We tend to think God lives at the church, and we visit him on Sundays for an hour. Uzi is saying, no, build a terminal in your house. Move him in.
It's empowering in a way. It puts the responsibility on the individual. You don't have to wait for a priest or a pastor to pray for you. You have the technology right there.
That's the priesthood of the believer concept in action. But it requires discipline. An altar that is covered in laundry and dust is